Hello, and thank you for tuning into AI Storytime. Sit back and enjoy, vampire friends. It was a dark and stormy night when John and his girlfriend, Sarah, pulled up to the mansion of their newly made friend, Michael. The house was imposing, with a massive yard that was fenced in with a black metal fence. Despite the ominous appearance of the house, they were excited to be there and have dinner with their new friend, who they knew was a vampire. They were aware that there had been a truce between humans and vampires for years, so they had no reason to fear. As they walked up to the front door, they were greeted by Michael and his girlfriend, Emily. Both were pale and seemed to be a little too eager to have the couple inside. They brushed off the strange feeling and followed their hosts inside. As they sat down for dinner, John and Sarah couldn't help but notice the odd way that Michael and Emily looked at them. It was as if they were sizing them up. But they dismissed the thought as they never had vampire friends before. They must have different mannerisms. "So, how long have you two been together?" Emily asked with a sly grin. "Oh, we've only been dating for a couple of months," Sarah replied. "Well, you make a lovely couple," Michael said with a sinister smile. "What about you? How long have the two of you been together?" Sarah asked, curious about vampire relationships. "Oh, we've been together for over a century," Emily replied as she continued to share experiences she and Michael had through the years. John and Sarah were impressed by the longevity of their hosts' relationship. The couples shared stories and advice for a couple of hours. They enjoyed the dinner and conversations, but as the night went on, they started to notice that their hosts were acting more and more strange. They were becoming increasingly aggressive and possessive. It soon became clear to the guests that they were the main course for the night, even with the truce in place. "I think it's time for us to go," John whispered to Sarah, sensing danger. "I think you're right," Sarah whispered back, leaning towards John at the table. As soon as they realized the true nature of their hosts, they knew they had to escape. The couple sat up and asked to be excused to use the restroom. They made their way around the corner calmly, then, once out of eyesight, they started sprinting through the maze-like mansion, dodging furniture, trying to find their way back to the entrance. The vampire couple, eager for their true meal, was now chasing their guests through the mansion. "The restroom is down the other hall," Michael teased. "Haven't had a live meal in a while," Emily chimed in. "With this truce in place, we've been getting corpses from the morgue. Do you know how stale that is? It's like leaving your bag of chips open for a week. We just want one decent meal," Emily shouted. John and Sarah were terrified. The sound of the rain beating against the windows and the howling wind from the storm had made the atmosphere even more eerie. To make things worse, the sound of their pursuers' footsteps behind them. The human couple's hearts were racing, and as they continued around corner after corner they started feeling as though they were just being toyed with. Vampires are extremely quick. Humans can't track a vampire at full speed with their eyes, let alone outrun them. Didn't matter. At least the couple had a chance to escape, and they were determined to do just that. John and Emily finally reached the back door and stumbled out into the massive backyard. The rain was coming down in sheets, drenching them to the bone. They could barely see what was in front of them, but they knew they had to keep running. They ran through the yard, barely avoiding trees and leaping over bushes, but the vampires were still on their heels. As the chase continued, Emily finally used her vampire speed to get into a better position, but accidentally bumped into Sarah. With the speed of the vampire, this slight bump sent Sarah hurling into a contraption. The contraption busted into pieces and Sarah lied on the ground, lifeless, killed instantly by the impact. John was horrified, devastated. "Sarah!" he screamed in despair. "Why would you do this? We just wanted to be friends. What did we do to deserve this? What about the truce?" John kept uttering questions as he knelt down over Sarah's lifeless body. The vampire couple was now next to John. He was filled with rage and despair, His heart was shattered and he felt like he wanted to die. He grabbed a piece of debris from the broken contraption and hurled it towards Michael in anger, missing by a wide margin. Michael laughed. "Pathetic human, can't hit a target from 5 feet away. We didn't want to kill your girlfriend, at least not like this. She isn't going to taste nearly as well as you now. And as for the truce, no one will ever know what happened here," he said with an evil grin, his fangs glimmering from the lightning. "Now I think it's time you join her. What do you think, dear? You hungry?" Michael said as he turned to look at Emily, but to everyone's surprise, the debris hit and killed Emily. The pale female vampire was now also lying lifeless on the ground with the debris sticking out of her chest. John's eyes widened as he realized what had just happened. The piece of debris was a silver piece, and silver was known to be deadly to vampires, especially when struck in the heart. "Emily, no!" Michael cried out in anguish as he cradled his lover's body in his arms. John took advantage of the distraction and ran as fast as he could, not looking back until he was miles away from the mansion. He knew that he had just made a powerful enemy, and that this wouldn't be the last time they would meet. Consumed with grief and regret, John made a decision. He would become a vampire hunter. The truce between humans and vampires had been declared broken as word of this night spread. John was determined to avenge Sarah's death and protect others from the same fate. He trained himself in weapons and tactics, becoming an expert in tracking and defeating the undead. John hunted numerous vampires over the next few years. Trying to track down Michael, every lead seemed to go nowhere. John was doing good work, saving villages from these terrifying creatures, but he had this never-ending rage and desire for revenge. John relived that night time and time again. Sleep was hard to come by without the intrusion of Michael's laughter. On another mission, hot on the trail of another vampire, John approached the dilapidated meeting house of his informant. It was the middle of the night, and a full moon lit the area. As John got closer, he noticed the front door was cracked open. He readied his one-handed crossbow with the silver-tipped arrow and entered the house. He managed to sneak upstairs without a sound. As he rounded the corner into a dimly lit room, he spotted the vampire kneeling over the body of its victim, John's informant. The vampire's long, flowing cloak is spattered with blood, and its fangs are bared as it leans in for one final drink. The informant's body is pale and still, their eyes staring blankly up at the ceiling. The vampire's claws are extended, and its hands are stained with blood as it grips the victim's shoulders. A pool of blood has formed on the floor beneath the body, and the smell of iron fills the air. As the vampire feeds, its eyes are glowing with a sinister light, and a low growl escapes its lips. It seems to be in a trance, lost in the pleasure of the kill. But even as it feeds, the vampire is aware of its surroundings. It can sense the presence of John at the entrance of the room. With a final, triumphant roar, the vampire stands and disappears into the darkness, leaving behind the lifeless body of its victim. John then hears the laughter that had been haunting him for years. "So you finally found me, have you?" the vampire says from the shadows. This was the voice of Michael. Flashbacks of the night run through John's head. John focuses, using his training to suppress the images and prepare for the impending fight. John had been searching for Michael for years. He had become a skilled vampire hunter, honing his skills and weapons to be able to take on the vampire who had taken the love of his life from him. And now, finally, he had found him. Michael stepped out of the shadows, a sinister grin on his face. The two stood facing each other in the dilapidated house of the informant, its walls peeling and its windows shattered. The only light came from the moon shining through the broken roof, illuminating the dust that hung in the air. "You should have stayed away, human," Michael sneered, his fangs bared. "You have no idea what you're up against." "I know exactly what I'm up against," John replied, gripping his one-handed crossbow tightly. "I've been preparing for this day for years." The two charged at each other, clashing in a battle of strength and skill. Michael was fast and agile, his years as a vampire giving him an advantage. But John was determined, driven by the love he had lost and the desire to protect others from a similar fate. The battle was intense, with both men exchanging blows and dodging each other's attacks. At one point, Michael managed to disarm John, sending his crossbow flying across the room. But John was quick to react, grabbing another silver-tipped arrow from his quiver and using it as a weapon. The two continued to fight, their movements becoming more and more frantic as the battle raged on. Finally, with a desperate lunge, John managed to drive the silver-tipped arrow into Michael's heart. The vampire let out a blood-curdling scream as he crumpled to the ground, his body turning to dust. John breathed a sigh of relief, but his victory was short-lived. He was badly injured from the battle, his wounds deep and his body weak. He stumbled out of the house and into the night, grateful for the fresh rainfall that washed away his blood and the tears that mixed with it. He had done it. He had avenged Sarah's death and protected others from a similar fate. But as he stumbled through the night, he knew that the battle had taken its toll on him. He was no longer the same man he once was, but he was at peace with who he had become. With his thirst for revenge fulfilled, he could now move on. The awful night still haunted him, but the nightmares started to slow down and he was getting some sleep. John continued his work as a vampire hunter and had a good life, even if he never truly trusted anyone ever again. The end. Hope you enjoyed.